What's up guys, your bro here from Neo Vintage Gaming, and I got another console video for you guys. Now for you guys that don't know how these videos go, basically I choose a console generation, I give you guys my thoughts, and I go through all the games that I have of that console. Today we're going over the Sega Genesis. Now last week I did the NES, so if you haven't seen that video, go check that out. And this is kind of a relaxed, chill type video. I'll have timestamps below of the different sections of the video. So I'm gonna go over the hardware first, then I'm gonna go over the games, and we're just gonna relax, chill back, take a coffee. We're all in quarantine right now, so use this as kind of like a mini podcast opportunity. While we're, in quarantine, it's gonna be kind of solo videos between me and Steve. So this is kind of what I chose to do for the solo videos. So let's just get started on the hardware. Now for you guys that don't know, the Sega Genesis, or the Mega Drive abroad, in other places other than the United States, was dropped in '88 in Japan. It was dropped in 1989 in the United States. A lot of people that are not super educated about the game industry and game history, a lot of them think that the Genesis was kind of Sega's first foray into the console industry, and that's actually not really the case. Of course, you have the Master System that was competitive against the NES, for example, during that 8-bit generation in the early 80s. And then before that, you have the SG-1000 that I would love to get a copy of. Lesser known consoles, not a whole bunch of, must-have hits on there, but a part of Sega's history nonetheless. To call Sega's histories in the console market tumultuous would be kind of an understatement, but I think the Genesis is where they really got a lot of gas in the engine and give Nintendo a real, run for their money. So let's get started on the piece of hardware. Now I have my personal Genesis that I use here. Now this is actually the second iteration of the Sega Genesis. I have a Sega Genesis Mini here too. This is kind of the form factor of the original one. There's what would be called kind of like the Genesis second model. There was three major iterations of the Sega Genesis. You have the original with the kind of like volume slider and all that. You have this version, which is the second version that I really, really like. Lightweight, beautiful, sleek black design that I really love. And then you have a really small Genesis 3, which is the real small one. So yeah, I love the form factor of the Sega Genesis to this day. A nice, real firm plastic build. A little bit cheaper, in my opinion, in terms of build quality than the Super Nintendo at the time. Here we have a Genesis box for the Genesis Mini. Just figured I'd include that. Love the design of that. And then I have all my games here. This is one of the game pads that they had available. Now this is known as a 3-button setup. There is a controller with 6 buttons. Great for fighters. I don't have a version of that controller as much as I would really love one. But hopefully I can get my hands on one of them one day. So that's a pretty much a light console go, and we're gonna just go over the games now. So my collection starts with Altered Beast. Now I'm not gonna give you guys a quick look, close look at the pictures like I did on the NES videos, because I didn't realize that I use the reverse camera on my phone because the quality is good, but then that flips the image so you guys aren't really looking at each other anything, so I apologize for that. So Altered Beast, this game is not that great, but I saw it in stores for a real cheap price at the time. It must have been like $3.99, $4.99 or something like that. And I grew up on this game. I had a Sega Genesis collection on Game Boy Advance that included this. I think it had like Golden Axe, Echo the Dolphin. There was a lot of iconic games, Sonic Spinball, I believe. And so I have like a lot of nostalgia for this game, but I mean, just keeping it real, like this game is kind of terrible. But I got a lot of love for it. If you don't know, it's kind of like a side-scrolling action game, not too much platforming. It's similar in vein to Golden Axe, for example, and you kind of use different powers to shift to different animal species. And you got, the iconic like Wolfman, for example, like that. Some amazing like voice, I wouldn't say it's like voice acting, but they have like an audio chip for like clips and like voices, stuff like that, and it's pretty iconic. Second one we have is Batman Forever, I believe. Yeah, Batman Forever. This was, I think, the first Genesis game that I actually got when I started collecting for Genesis. Got a lot of love for this game, but it's by far not my favorite Batman game. Batman on NES is probably one of my favorite there. But yeah, I mean, I was just glad to get this. It's a movie tie-in game, some pretty nice pixel art. We have probably in my top 3, if not one of my favorite Genesis games. It's Comix Zone. I wanted to hunt this down for the longest, and it took me a little bit because I wanted to find a good copy with a good sticker on here. It got an amazing label that I was able to pick up, so super glad to have this. I believe I got this at a local game store, if I'm not mistaken. If you don't know, this has some of the most beautiful pixel art of pretty much any Genesis game, and you're playing a character that's kind of in a comic, and it's a beat 'em up action game that you kind of jump from panel to panel. Really great kinetic action, amazing kind of different animations that they included for it. The world is just bright and engaging. Just a phenomenal game. If you guys are interested in me doing a kind of a gameplay for that, let me know in the comment section. I'll probably do one anyways, but yeah, Comix Zone, fantastic game. Next one is a lesser known title called Eternal Champions. If you don't know, it's basically, how would I describe it? It's a fighting game for sure, classic 2D fighting game, but it utilizes art that is reminiscent of kind of like 90s McFarlane comics, like similar to like Spawn and the TMNT run and all that, some of the Spider-Man stuff. And so they did a phenomenal job with the character design of this game, and it still plays pretty fun. It plays like a lot of the fighters of the time. Less like Mortal Kombat and more like something like a Samurai Showdown, for example. That's a good example. We have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now I have 2 Power Rangers games actually. One is based on the movie that was released at the time, and one is based on the show. The show one is way better. We actually did a gameplay for that on the channel. Check it out. We don't have a lot of videos, so it won't be hard for you guys to find. But yeah, we did a fun gameplay of this. It's pretty much a fighting game, and then this is a side-scrolling beat 'em up. I have a lot of love for Power Rangers. I wouldn't say I'm like a Power Ranger stan. It's not something that I have like an incredible amount of knowledge over, but I really enjoy these games, and you get to play as all the different Rangers. You get to play through different scenarios from the show, so that's really fun. So we got Mortal Kombat 2 here, and I'm gonna include my case games too. I forgot to bring these over. So we got Mortal Kombat here. I have it in case with the game cartridge and the booklet, and then we got Mortal Kombat 2 right here too. So 1 and 2 got these both through Video Games Monthly, so I'm really thankful to them. Again, I've spoke their praises on the channel, so I don't want to go too hard on it, like you guys think I'm like sponsored or anything like that. But I really enjoy the service, and luckily I'm able to have the first 2 Mortal Kombats again. Of course, I would like to have the third one, and I'm sure in time I will get it. You guys know Mortal Kombat, man. This is an iconic game from the early 90s. Blood, gore. The Genesis version with all the blood, it didn't get edited like the Nintendo version. And so, great additions to the collection there. We have NBA Jam here. Now, this is a game that I actually have in box, on the Super Nintendo, that you guys can see on the Super Nintendo video that I would imagine I'm going to do next week. So keep an eye out for that if you like this video. NBA Jam, it's an arcade basketball game. Some real iconic lines from there. Plays amazingly to this day. Great, clean frame rate, nothing too crazy. Amazing sprite art, and just real fun gameplay that I think has aged really well. To go through some of my boxed games I have here, we have The Revenge of Shinobi. Now I have all 3 Shinobi games, and we'll go through that. This was one that I actually got a retro game convention that I'm really excited to have. If you want to see, I got the black and white booklet, and then I have the game right there. Shinobi is pretty much my favorite trilogy on the Sega Genesis. These games are just phenomenal. They've been kind of copied in many ways through other franchises. If you don't know, they're kind of like side-scrolling action games with brilliant art on it. You have like these crazy leaf effects and bamboo shoots and amazing set pieces that they've included. I recently did a gameplay for 1980X that actually has like a little subsection mini game that is obviously inspired by the Shinobi trilogy. So I'm really excited to have this. This was actually one of the games that I got along with Strider that I mentioned last week at that retro game convention. The next one we have is Judge Dredd. And if you guys want to see, got the booklet, got the cartridge. Now, we also did a gameplay of this on the channel, so if you have any questions as to how that game is, just go check out that gameplay. Like many games on the console, side-scrolling action game. We have Jeopardy Sports Edition. I got this on the Video Games Monthly video that I also posted. Not a game that I really have any interest in. I mean, since I love the Genesis so much, I pretty much like any Genesis game I can get my hands on, but this game is kind of really useless to me. I'm not really that into Jeopardy, and I definitely don't know like 90s sports references. So I played this game for like a couple minutes before I was just like, there's zero progress I can make in this game unless I sat there Googling every fact, and what's the fun in that? We have Cool Spot, really dope action platformer game with some cool 3D effects that you see on these consoles. Anytime you see like anything remotely 3D on like an 8-bit or 16-bit console, I really love that. So the next game we have is Shinobi 2. We got Shadow Dancer, The Secret of Shinobi. I always forget the subtitles of it. This was one that was a little bit more annoying to find. I actually got a copy of it from a retro game store in my area, and it didn't work, and I was like so bummed because at the time I had Shinobi 1 and 3, and I was like, oh, all I need is 2. It's driving me nuts that I can't find 2 anywhere. It was kind of like when I was collecting Castlevania. It was kind of the same situation. And so, yeah, this version was not working. I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can find anything on eBay. Sometimes I get a little apprehensive on buying retro games through eBay, unless it's like a super trusted seller and they're showing like screen grabs of it working on the TV, just because you buy it, you wait all that time for it to come, you ship, you clean it up with a 1-up card, you load into the console, all that for it to not work, and now you can either initiate a return, and it's just a whole mess that I didn't really want to deal with. But I super lucked out with this. I ordered it, good seller. He wanted very little for it. I only paid, I paid between 10 and 15 bucks for this. So real good steal on this. And yeah, Shinobi 2, as I said earlier, Shinobi is my favorite trilogy. And then Shinobi 3, one of my favorite of the franchise. When I go to play Shinobi, I usually go to Shadow Dancer. I love the beginning of, and then the first one is just so iconic for me, but you can't go wrong with Shinobi 3. I'm a little sad that there's like a lot of damage to the label here, but I'm like not a completionist by any means, and I'm not like I need the highest quality possible. I kind of just like, if I can have it in my collection, I'm usually pretty happy. So yeah, Shinobi 3, another good. You can't go wrong with any of 3 of them. They're very similar games, but they kind of innovate on one another, and they have kind of like a continuity between them storylines. Now we have the most iconic trilogy on the Genesis. It's the Sonic trilogy. You got Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and the most well-liked and well-regarded, and the one people want the most, Sonic 3. And the reason for that is the fact that Sonic 3 is no longer on current collections that they release. It's not on the Genesis Mini. It's not on any of the newer Sonic collections. It's on the older ones when you go back to, I believe, the GameCube and the PS2. But I guess because of music issues, we've talked over it on the podcast, the Neo Vintage podcast, if you haven't checked that out. But yeah, I'm really glad to have this amazing music on that. Man, you can't go wrong with Sonic. And this is kind of like the golden age of Sonic. This is when it was like, you know, the highest regarded, beautiful 16-bit ARC, this crazy blast processor that they were using to render all of that. And the games hold up really well. Sonic 3 is definitely my favorite of the trilogy, but I got a lot of love for the original one too. And we have another Sonic title. We have Sonic 3D Blast, a game that I personally don't really have that much love for. I was in the position where I was like, you know what, I love the Genesis. I pretty much want any of the Sonic games from the console that I can get my hands on. So bumped into this at the store, got it for a couple bucks. Played it a couple times. Not a game that I have a lot of love for, but I'm glad to have it in my collection. One of my favorite Sonic games of all time, though I will admit that it has a lot of issues. Sonic Spinball. For you guys that don't know, it is a Sonic pinball game. It's a lot slower than you might remember if you haven't returned to it recently. I played it not too long ago, and I'm like, man, did it always play this slow? It's not a high frame rate kinetic game like you'd experience with a lot of the newer or the PC pinball games. This one is not like perfect emulation of a pinball table by any means, but I got a lot of love for it, a lot of homages and references to other Sonic titles on it. So if you can get your hands on a copy of this, I highly recommend it. You get a lot of fun out of this. One of the most iconic games of all time. Street Fighter 2. Which version do I have? Okay, I got the Special Championship Edition. I actually had a version of this on the Super Nintendo that I actually traded with Steve, and he gave me another game because I got this version on the Super Nintendo. And because I'm not like a massive Street Fighter 2 fan, I got a lot of love for it. Got a shirt in my closet of it, but not like a massive fan. So I was like, you know, I don't need multiple copies of it. I had 2 copies. of Mortal Kombat, one on the Super Nintendo, one on the Genesis, and I had 2 versions of Street Fighter 2, one on the Super Nintendo, one on the Genesis. I opted for the Genesis versions for both of those, and I gave the Super Nintendo versions to Steve, so he has that in his collection. Maybe he'll do a collection video for you guys one day so you guys can see that. But man, this game has like a million versions, but you cannot go wrong with Street Fighter 2, classic fighting game. Next one, I forget the title of it. Tiny Toon Buster's Hidden Treasure. So this is a game that you guys have seen if you've seen my video games monthly unboxings. Again, those come out monthly as I get the boxes. And this was one of the games that I got. And it's a really dope Konami platformer game, not really that much action. Amazing animations and sprite art on their real bright environments that you really only see on the Genesis. There's other people who are more educated on the subject that can go into more depth into it than I can about the differences between like Genesis games and how they look versus Super Nintendo games and how they look. I'm not a console war guy, especially back then, so it's not that I'm like gonna say that the Genesis versions are better than the Super Nintendo version. I don't get into all that. I love all the consoles, but man, you can't go wrong with some of those platformers on the Genesis. They're just all so beautiful. One of the dopest visual games on the console is Vector Man. Fully 3D rendered, and again, during this era, the early 90s, late 80s, these weren't the type of games that you would see. So games like this and Cool Spot and stuff like that really stand out, in my opinion. And Vector Man, real dope, like side-scrolling action game. You kind of shoot and you're this kind of like polygonal ball-like, and that sounds crazy. Imagine like cubics made out of spheres and 3D rendered and running through environments and shooting other enemies. Really dope. How they made this game run on the Sega Genesis, I have no clue. It's really impressive. And then the last game in my collection, we have X-Men 2 Clone Wars. Not to be mistaken with X-Men and Clone Wars. Star Wars The Clone Wars. How did I blank on that? I think there's like the second game that I got on the Sega Genesis. So I don't know how many games I have. I probably have around like 20-ish or something like that, which is again small compared to a lot of other people, but I still got a lot of love for the console. So if you don't know, this is an action side-scrolling game, beat 'em up. You're fighting like sentinels and different kind of bad guys. You have your choice of different heroes. This game is nowhere as good as kind of like the arcade game that you might know, where you can choose from all these different, you have like 4-player concurrently playing, walking across the screen. It's not really that good, but you got some platforming aspects of it. You get your choice of like, let me try to remember. You get Wolverine, you get Cyclops, you might have Storm, you might have Jubilee if I'm not mistaken. There's a couple, maybe Beast or something like that. So you have a choice of a couple different X-Men. Of course, X-Men like the 92 era is the most iconic for X-Men in my opinion. And so having a game around that, I was really excited to have that in my collection. So if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's everything I have in my Genesis collection. Got you guys in a little box, a little Sega Genesis Mini. If you look on the Genesis Mini, you get a crap ton of games on there. So I can't speak its praises enough. So if you want to experience the Sega Genesis and you don't necessarily feel like tracking down the whole console and carts and all like that, I think the Genesis Mini is a great option for you. Is every single game worth having on the Genesis on here? No, but a good chunk of them. I mean, yeah, you got Eternal Champions, you got Earthworm Jim, Beyond Oasis, Altered Beast is on here. You get the Sonic games, sadly not Sonic 3. What is this? Streets of Rage is on here, Phantasy Star 4, Spinball, Dr. Robotnik, Mean Bean Machine. You get Virtua Fighter, Vector Man, Toe Jam and Earl, Shinobi 3. Like everything is on here. Pretty much Shining Force, Echo Dolphin, Castle Illusion. Pretty much almost anything you'd want on the Genesis is on here. So if you want to experience the Genesis for yourself, I highly suggest getting one of these. These are not nearly as scarce as a lot of the Nintendo mini consoles, so I highly recommend them. And you get really dope, good quality gamepads with it, just like the Nintendo consoles. But yeah, man, this is a console I have a lot of love for. It's one of the retro consoles that I return to probably the most, especially of my Sega consoles. I only have 2, unfortunately, this and the Genesis. I still am looking for a Saturn. If I see a Master System that's reasonably priced, I'll probably get it. It's just a matter of like, you get a console for what games pretty much, and I don't want to get a console that I won't play anything on. So I really want a Saturn, obviously. But yeah, man, the Genesis got a lot of love for it, and you got to respect the work that Sega put into it. And they really gave, Nintendo a run for their money. And since then, things hadn't gone so well before and after, even though they did move, millions of units before the Genesis even came out with the Master System and SG-1000 in Japan. So you got to give them credit there. But yeah, man, I highly recommend this console. They're pretty cheap. You can get a Genesis with cables and no games for maybe like 25 to 30 bucks probably, and most of the games worth having on the Genesis you can get for under 15 a piece for sure. And especially if you play the long game and you play it slow and you buy ones here and there as you get good deals, you can get them for under 10 a piece in my experience. So I highly suggest getting a Genesis, collecting for Genesis. It's pretty inexpensive. There's a lot of great titles on there, and you get to experience a lot of the great titles that the early 90s has to offer outside of the Super Nintendo ecosystem. If you guys like this video, be sure to leave a like and a comment and share and let everybody know, and leave some comments below of what consoles you'd like me to review next in my collection. Again, these are probably the consoles that I have the most: the NES, the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and then it kind of jumps to more the current gen consoles like the PS1, PS2. I have a couple GameCube games, my Dreamcast collection. Those are a little bit more scarce, but I wanted to at least do collection videos for the consoles that I have the most games for. So see you guys next week with the Super Nintendo video. Until next time, this is Jabrel for Neo Vintage Game.